This video was sponsored by CuriosityStream in partnership with my streaming service Nebula. It's a little hard to comprehend, right? There's a phone that you really want, you're willing to pay good money for it, and yet the company that makes it doesn't seem to want to sell it to you. Either a phone doesn't come to your region at all despite being globally relevant like the OPPO Find N, or it does expand globally but with a big delay such as the OnePlus 10 Pro, which disappointingly takes more than a month to be launched anywhere other than China. It seems random when so many of these companies are desperately trying to build a global presence, but there is a logic to it. So in the 83rd episode of the Story Behind series, let's explore the logic and the economics of country-exclusive launches, and especially those in China. In this video, we'll take a look at 6 different flagship phones, of which 3 had delayed launches globally, and 3 have sadly so far not had a proper international rollout at all. Starting with the first group, we have the OnePlus 10 Pro, the Xiaomi 12, and the Moto Edge 30 Pro, and these are the current flagships of 3 different Chinese phone brands that have all launched in China first, with promised international launches around February for each. In other words, a delay of about a month or 2, and the explanation for each of these delays is pretty much the same. To start with, we have to talk about the never-ending rush that all the phone companies are in, where they're constantly trying to beat other competitors to being first to market with the latest technologies and newest components. The most obvious such component every year is the new flagship Snapdragon chip, and Xiaomi and Motorola especially fought hard to claim the title of being the first to market with the 8 Gen 1 this year. And as it turns out, being first is way easier to do in China than anywhere else. To start with, China is the only market where Android phones don't have to go through Google's certification process for GMS, or Google Mobile Services, which is a requirement for pre-installing the Play Store and other Google apps. This certification includes hundreds of thousands of automated tests that, among other things, check a phone's software for bugs, security issues, and more, and the list of requirements alone is nearly 200 pages long. While there are ways to pass it relatively easily, especially on already tested hardware, it can take quite long to pull off on a brand new processor, with a brand new Android build, etc., which these flagships typically launch with. So being able to skip that in China completely means phones can just launch that much faster there, and if a company is in a rush to be the first to market with any new chip or new technology, it might make sense to just launch there first and then just delay the international launch until later. Now, a second reason in the case of these 3 phones in particular, it has to do with the Chinese New Year. This is the biggest shopping season in the world's largest smartphone market, and it usually falls on early February, so it is critically important for companies to have plenty of stock available by then already. Combined with supply chain shortages everywhere, that often means prioritizing stock to China completely until the holidays are done. My theory, by the way, is that Qualcomm specifically moved the release window of flagship Snapdragon processors to accommodate for this holiday. Previous generations were typically launched as late as the end of February at MWC, but over the years, that was gradually pushed back all the way to November, so phones could launch starting late December, and then brands would have the time to build, test, and ship plenty of units in time for the big New Year sales cycle, which is exactly what these 3 brands did. When combined with Huawei's collapse that left a huge open opportunity in the Chinese market, it makes sense that these brands would push their flagship launches as hard as possible there first, at least until New Year has passed, before bringing their new phones abroad. OnePlus and Realme are 2 brands that were specifically built to conquer international markets, and yet they have both started releasing their high-profile devices in China first since the Huawei collapse, because everyone is just trying to establish a new pecking order in China right now. Okay, so that's these 3 explained. It's just faster and more urgent to launch in China first, so all of that makes sense. But now, let's talk about the OPPO Find N, the Honor Magic V, and the Xiaomi Mi Mix Fold, 3 high-profile foldable devices that have so far not been promised an international launch at all. I have managed to find an upcoming Honor event at MWC titled Magic this year, so maybe the Magic V will launch internationally eventually, but that isn't actually confirmed yet. So all the things that we said so far still apply here. It's just a little faster, a little easier, and a little more urgent to launch in China than before. But beyond that, these 3 foldable devices also give us a glimpse at why sometimes it might not make sense to go international at all. Bringing any product to a new country means tons of overhead costs. These are costs that have to be paid in each country, whether a company sells one phone or a million. Some of these costs are obvious, like localizing and translating software to a new language, designing new custom packaging, establishing a repair process and customer support in each market, and acquiring all the necessary local certificates. Beside Google stuff, those include, for example, national safety certificates like CE, FCC, UL, ROSE, and many others that cover radiation levels, harmful substances, fire safety, etc. But also certification from each major mobile carrier selling the phone, which typically has to be renewed for each major software update as well. I'm sure that you've noticed that software updates on phones sold through carriers often come with a delay, and that's in large part due to the extra testing and certifications that are required. Those can be expensive and time-consuming for any phone, but they are especially so for foldables because those are more complex to build, they are more complex to repair, and they have more complex software. And even beside those, there's also the problem of marketing. Companies like OPPO, Vivo, and Huawei especially have built their whole brand on hiring A-list local celebrities and sponsoring local sports teams and events and whatnot, as well as putting up massive ads everywhere. Unlike online ads in a search engine, for example, that can be ramped up and down as quickly as you want, this type of marketing can't. It's kind of like a fire hose. You can turn it on, you can turn it off. It's very difficult to do it at a trickle just because you're expecting low sales in a country. And bringing key new products to new markets without turning the fire hose on is very uncomfortable for these brands because that's their whole strategy. So brands have all of these high fixed costs that they would have to pay every time they enter a new market. Those costs are especially high for foldables, and they would need pretty high sales volumes to even just break even to cover them. Of course, foldables are decidedly not a high volume business yet, as combined sales have only reached about 7.5 million units worldwide last year. That is a huge jump from the year before, but for context, almost 1.4 billion smartphones were sold in that same period, so all foldables combined still only have about a 0.5% market share so far, and these three brands would have a particularly tough time even getting a big chunk of that small market outside of China. Their phones might be good, but none of the three have established themselves as premium brands in most parts of the world yet. They are still mostly seen as the budget alternatives to the likes of Samsung, so Xiaomi, Honor, and OPPO selling phones at like 1,500 euros in Europe, for example, in large quantities, well, it seems like a massive challenge. In other words, these brands would probably only get a tiny part of an already tiny foldable smartphone market, and yet they'd have all the costs of going international, and that kind of doesn't make sense, especially given all of the supply chain shortages anyway, so they're probably better off on just focusing on their home market instead of trying to spread themselves too thin. Now, beside that, it also became pretty clear to me after I had some conversations with some European decision makers at a bunch of these companies that often these companies don't even really make the decision of what phone to bring to what market entirely on their own. They have some help. In markets like Europe and North America, where incredibly strong carriers like T-Mobile, Vodafone, and O2 dominate not just the phone sales, but also heavily promote phones on behalf of the manufacturers, what often happens is that phone makers basically show carriers their portfolio of devices and ask them which ones they want to sell. And within a small niche like foldables, carriers might just not want to invest into having more than one or two models on offer at the same time. I guess you might be wondering then why Huawei, given everything that I've just said, still decided to launch and heavily promote their foldable flagships internationally at all, and to explain their counterintuitive reasons, I've made a bonus video over at Nebula that is exclusive for subscribers. This bonus explainer joins a bunch of other Nebula Plus videos that I've made in the past, the 4 whole Nebula originals in my Technorama series, and the regular YouTube videos of both me and tons of great educational creators, of course, all without ads and any sort of nasty tracking. Nebula is our very own video streaming service built and owned by creators like Real Engineering, Not Just Bikes, Polymatter, Wendover Productions, and more. It's a great platform that lets us focus on creating instead of just pleasing the algorithm, and it lets you get more content from the creators that you love. You can get both Nebula and CuriosityStream in a bundle for just $15 for an entire year, which is about as much as other streaming services cost in just a month. And CuriosityStream is, of course, the premier place on the internet to watch professionally produced documentaries. I have recently finished watching this documentary, which was a fascinating look at how the world's first published computer program and a plan for a computer made of cogs and wheels was born in 1843 by Countess Ava Lovelace, which I think my audience would really enjoy watching as well. And CuriosityStream is also full of other great documentaries spanning history, nature, science, and more. Get access to both services with the link in the description. Don't forget to watch the bonus video, and I'll see you in the next one.